Good afternoon. I'm Commissioner Joel Bousman, President of the Western Interstate Region, and I'm from Sublette County in western Wyoming. County commissioners from across the country are here in Washington meeting with their representatives and senators, bringing one simple message back home. Now is the time to fully fund the payment in lieu of taxes program and reauthorize secure rural schools. These important public lands programs provide millions of dollars for public services at our local level, including search and rescue operation, emergency patrols, infrastructure repair, and of course our schools. Very briefly, in my county alone, a small county with 10,000 people in western Wyoming, our PILT payment in 2017 was $890,000. Our secure rural schools payment in 2015 was $463,000 versus $125,000 if we were being reimbursed based on timber receipts. Our first speaker today is the man who created secure rural schools back in 2000, Senator Ron Wyden. I'd like to invite Multnomah County, Oregon Commissioner Loretta Smith to introduce the senator.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Loretta Smith and I'm a Multnomah County Commissioner. And we all know how important the PILT and SRS is. It helps the most vulnerable in our communities, and we know that without this funding, we will not be able to do the jobs that we do. I just want to quickly introduce Senator Wyden, who is the father of secure rural schools. He's been a champion of rural counties for many years. I've worked for him for many years, and now as a county commissioner, this is so important for him to continue to champion the SRS bill. Senator Wyden.
Thank you. Thank you to both of the commissioners, and we are on the House of Representatives side, so I'm going to make this a filibuster-free zone and be very brief. And this is so timely that you're here because, as you know, there are discussions going on right now with respect to the big spending bill, so-called omnibus spending bill. So your timing is just ideal. I want to make just 3 points very quickly. The first is, when we wrote this bill back in 1999, we always said that this measure to help schools and roads and rural services was intended to be a complement, not a substitute, for increasing the timber harvest in a sustainable fashion. And that was said again and again when the law was being debated in the late 1990s. Second, at a time when our government can come up with close to $2 trillion for a tax bill stacked disproportionately to multinational corporations and the affluent, it would be particularly offensive to hold back these funds, because if you do, you all know better than I, that's a policy to turn rural America into a sacrifice zone. And we're here to tell you that's not going to happen on our watch, period. As you know, as the years evolved, we kept picking up more and more support. That's how we added the expansion for the payment in lieu of taxes provision, which is particularly important, again, because all of these are communities where the federal government owns most of the land. And I'm going to close with this. It's especially important that we secure these funds for secure rural schools and PILT at a time when the federal government continues to engage in practices that make it hard for rural folks to manage their land. And in particular, Mike Crapo, he's the Republican senator from Idaho, he and I have been fighting to end this really destructive practice known as fire borrowing. As you know, in rural America, we've seen these infernos, huge mega fires, and what the government does is shorts prevention, and then when the infernos break out, the government borrows from the prevention fund to put the fire out, and the problem gets worse. So at a time when the government can find close to $2 trillion for the tax cuts, at a time when the government continues to engage in inefficient practices like fire borrowing, and at a time when we've said loud and clear that this is a safety net. It doesn't replace increasing the harvest in a sustainable way. It's a complement to it. This is your time. This is your time to make the case that on our watch, rural America isn't going to be a sacrifice zone. I am honored to have been with you in this fight for essentially 20 years. And as long as I have the honor to represent Oregon in the United States Senate, we are going to stay at it until this program is made permanent as part of federal law. Thanks for all your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. We appreciate what you do for all of our counties across America. Now I would like to invite Lincoln County, Washington Commissioner Scott Hutzell to introduce Congresswoman McMorris Rodgers.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure she'll be here, but
Sure, yeah.
let's do somebody else first, and then,
Okay.
right?
Someone, is there another representative?
Representative Kilmer is here.
Kilmer.
Kilmer.
But I think they're closer to the podium.
We're gonna, Representative McMorris Rodgers is not here yet, so we're gonna ask Representative Derek Kilmer to speak from Washington.
Thanks.
Thank you, Representative.
It's a rare moment when you have a bunch of elected officials trying to stay away from the microphone. But I want to thank everybody for being here. Listen, this conversation around payment in lieu of taxes and secure rural schools really, really matters. It matters for our schools, for our infrastructure, for our law enforcement. You know, you've seen these funds over the years really start to dwindle. And you know, these payments aren't earmarks, they're not handouts, they're simply the federal government paying its fair share to communities that can't generate their own tax revenue because their home, you know, if you look at my district, I represent more trees than people. You know, and our communities are made up of a lot of federal lands, and that has an economic impact. Counties need these funds to make sure that kids in our neck of the woods have access to great teachers, to make sure that businesses have the infrastructure that they need to be successful. And I know I don't have to tell you what happens when Congress fails to deliver. Listen, the county leaders who are here are facing some very tough choices as a consequence of Congress not providing some certainty. And these are choices that they shouldn't be faced with having to make between textbooks or fixing roads, between investing in public safety or investing in basic services like broadband to support local businesses. No community should have to face those decisions. And that's why we are all fighting to ensure that Congress holds up its end of the deal and fully funds secure rural schools and fully funds payment in lieu of taxes. Now, I'm glad to see some folks here from Washington State. You know, this matters. This is about giving rural communities certainty so that the next generation has the same opportunity to make a living in the same place that they grew up. You know, because I don't want our region's top export to be young people. We want to make sure that they can seek opportunities where they are, not someplace else. And this is personal to me. I grew up on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. Both my folks were school teachers, and I watched as our community started to feel left behind, as harvest levels drops, and counties had no way to recoup those losses. And I watched as businesses packed up and left. I saw the impact on my friends' parents, and that's why I got into public service. Congress needs to deliver, because the economic futures of folks in Forks and Port Angeles, Washington are just as important as the economic futures of folks who live in Seattle and Portland. So I want to thank everybody for being here. You represent communities from all across the country that are facing the same challenges, and it is essential that Congress hears you. And I want you to know you've got some folks here who are hear you loud and clear. Thanks, everybody.
Good afternoon. Scott Hutzel, Lincoln County Commissioner, Lincoln County, Washington, Eastern Washington. It's my extreme honor today to introduce a young woman that's a pride of Eastern Washington. This is the other Washington, about 3,000 miles west of here. She grew up in rural Eastern Washington, has risen to the highest ranking Republican woman in Congress and the conference chair for the House Republicans. She has got a great husband, Brian, 3 beautiful children, Cole, Grace, and Bryn, all born while she was a congresswoman. She understands the importance and fully funding of SRS and PILT and how important it is to the counties that rely on it to provide those needed services in rural America. We are very proud of how she represents us in rural Washington and rural America. She's a wife, she's a mom, and she's our Cathy. Please help me in welcoming 7-term, soon to be 8-term, Washington State 5th District Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here, and I'm just thrilled to be joined by the National Association of Counties. These leaders at the county level from all over the, you're Washington, Oregon, and Michigan, New Mexico, the country. Where else? Idaho. I know where that is. But it's just they're on the front lines, and we are here to join and support and to raise awareness as to the importance of the Secure Rural Schools program. So over nearly 100 years ago, it was recognized that we needed to make sure on our federal forests that revenue from the federal forest that dominate a lot of these counties and their property base is dedicated to supporting the local services, essential services for our schools and for our counties and our roads, and making sure that our communities are safe. And through the years, especially in recent decades, we've seen where that revenue has been decreasing. And it just makes it harder and harder then for those that are at the county level or in our schools trying to meet important needs and build communities and meet the needs of our kids and our families to survive. And I represent several counties who are dependent and need the Secure Rural School funding. Unfortunately, this program was put in place in 2000, but it expired in 2015. And we are here, we're joining to make sure that this is a priority, that we get it included in the budget agreement to raise the awareness here on Capitol Hill, in the House and the Senate, and to say that we must get this done. I come from northeastern Washington. Derek was talking about his area on the peninsula, but I come from timber-dependent communities. And what happens on our national forests drive the economy in those communities. And when this revenue, when there isn't the forest levels and the revenue coming off the forest, it means that these communities are in a desperate situation. And so we're working to get the forest management reforms also so that these are working forests, but we also need to have the support from the federal government, recognizing that it's the economic driver, and what happens on these forests impact our communities, impact families, impact our future. So Secure Rural Schools and PILT, we're here to get it done. So thank you everyone for joining.
I'm going to take the initiative to introduce Arizona Congressman Paul Gosar. He's here to speak to us today as well. And it's an honor for me to introduce the representative because he grew up in my home county and he helped build my house.
A log house, by the way. Yeah. Well, thank you, Joel. It's great seeing you, and thanks all the group here to bring attention to secure rural schools and PILT. Once again, these are contracts. These are contracts with the federal government with our western states. Now, in secure rural schools, we got to reauthorize it. But we make no mistake, these are contracts that the federal government owes to the western and rural communities. Now in Arizona, this is my 4th term, and I've represented over 85% of the geography of Arizona, all the rural towns, but Phoenix and Tucson. So we're really dependent upon how we work PILT and secure rural schools. It's important for our schools. We're hurting. We're hurting all the way around. Secure rural schools, we got to get back to working our forests so that we're actually getting some of the revenues regenerating back. It's a new renaissance in this country, and there's no reason why secure rural schools can't be in that same light. And the same thing with PILT. PILT's got to be one of those applications that we teach our Eastern members. It's not a handout. It's not welfare. It's what's due us as rural counties in western states. So thanks for bringing the highlight to everything. Thanks for your smiling faces. Remember, when you smile, everybody can't turn you away. I'm a recovering dentist, so I can't smile. So with that, thank you very, very much for lending your ear, your heart, and your bodies here. Let's make this happen. Thank you, Joel.
Next, we have Commissioner Henry Jaime here to introduce the Oregon Congresswoman.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Henry Jaime, and I'm Commissioner in Columbia County, Oregon, and I'm proud to serve all of those folks and also speak on behalf of all of my friends and colleagues from the Association of Oregon Counties who are here with us. It is so important to note how important these dollars are to rural counties. Our county is a small county in northwest Oregon up near the point, and we have a whole lot more trees than we've got people, and a lot of it's owned by private companies, but a lot of it is federal land. Just 10 short years ago, we were getting about $2.3 million a year out of SRS, and this last year it was just shy of $400,000. For a small county like ours, that makes a huge difference in the ability to pave roads, keep our jails open, and to keep criminals off the streets and to keep police cars on the roads. This is nowhere better known than in our 1st Congressional District, and it is my privilege and honor to introduce my friend and our Congresswoman, Suzanne Bonamici.
Capitol today. Especially warm welcome to those from the Pacific Northwest. It's a long way to travel, but we are so glad that you're here. All students deserve to have a quality education, and that's true whether they live in a suburb, a city, or in rural counties. And I have rural areas in the district I'm honored to represent. And our constituents in rural areas need public services like law enforcement and transportation and emergency services like the commissioner just mentioned. And for more than 15 years, these rural counties with federal timberland in Oregon and throughout the country have benefited from Secure Rural Schools funding. It's helped support not only public schools, but also those important services. We know that many of our rural counties have challenges with funding. In Northwest Oregon, I've heard this many times about how difficult it is to adequately pay for education and for public services without these federal dollars. We know rural areas were hit hard by the Great Recession, and we know that the decline of the timber industry with the decline, the economy still has not recovered. And the funding also from Secure Rural Schools helps to keep our forests healthy, which is more important than ever now that the West is facing increasingly devastating wildfires. Oregon's timber counties have received more than $3 billion since the program began, with Senator Wyden's leadership back there in the late 1900s and early 2000s. That federal support has made a significant difference for rural students and for communities. And you heard about the big cut in the dollars that Columbia County is getting, and that's really going to affect the economy there in Northwest Oregon. So local leaders and teachers and school administrators in rural counties have told me about the hardships that they face when Congress does not adequately maintain this program. We know they can't make up that budget shortfall, and I'll tell you, education is the best investment we can make. I'm glad there's bipartisan support for secure rural schools and for payment in lieu of taxes or PILT. Let's work together to authorize these wonderful programs that help our rural communities and provide certainty that these counties need. They rely on these funds to educate students and keep their communities safe. So I'll continue to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle toward a long-term solution to manage our forests effectively and provide communities with that financial stability they need, with good schools and with adequate services. So thank you all for being here today. I thank my colleagues who are here, and I thank all of you for visiting with us. Please tell your stories as you visit around the Capitol today, and thank you again.
Next is Congresswoman Beutler. Here today. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. It is a privilege to be here, and I'm a little bit too tall for this one. Can I pick it up? Is that okay?
Yeah, try to.
I don't know if it'll come over.
I couldn't make it come out.
He said it's not
I don't think it will.
All right, well, I'll just project. It's a privilege to be here. You know what I love about something like this is you see Republicans and Democrats standing shoulder to shoulder, because we know this has nothing to do with partisan politics. This is good government. This is good policy. As one of my colleagues said just a minute ago, this is a contract between the federal government and the counties. This is not a contract that the counties have reneged on. It's a contract that the federal government has reneged on. And here we are together linking arms saying we're not going to stop fighting until we see this through to the finish. Because as was said, secure rural schools and payment in lieu of taxes is a lifeline for our communities. And here's the thing that's remarkable to me. So I saw some of my commissioners when I came in, Klickitat County, Skamania County. These commissioners are doing everything they can to provide leadership with less and less and less. And here's got to be the frustrating part, sitting every day and seeing the federal forest just disintegrate before your eyes, right? Especially knowing the value that's there. You know, in my mind, when the federal government made policy, I don't know, 25 or 30 years ago, that had a direct impact on the revenue that came off of the forests, the federal government then needed to step up and say, we're going to keep you whole. Because one of the things I've heard from my commissioners is, hey, we'd love to manage our own land. We don't need, we would prefer it. If you would let us manage it, we can handle it locally. So either the federal government needs to return some of that authority locally for locals to use it, right? Or they need to keep the contract. And I think that's what you hear here today. You know, Suzanne, Congressman Bonamici mentioned the impact to the forest. It's real. You walk through our federal forests and you want to cry, really. I do. When I compare them to the state DNR lands or to private lands, and you just see the fuel sitting on the forest floor, and then we wonder why we're having devastating forest fires. And then it's eating back into the Forest Service budget, and it's this negative cycle that's costing not just us here, but future generations. You know, I grew up in my district in a rural part of Clark, well, not so rural anymore, part of Clark County. And we used to recreate on our federal forest. I was laughing because we probably weren't always supposed to go into the places we went, and we were good kids. But I look at that and I think, are my kids going to have those same opportunities? Are they going to be able to call this home and love it? And our forests are such an integral part of that. So I am excited to be a part of this group. We are fighting in several different ways, whether we can get it on the Farm Bill. I heard Cathy talk about the budget agreement. Know that we're leaving no stone unturned. Some of this is just an education effort. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell a lawmaker, this is not a welfare payment. This isn't the federal government being benevolent. We took the use of their land, and those local receipts then are not staying local. So we either give them the money or we give them the land back. And as soon as you say that, I mean, it registers, but it has been quite an education process for, I think, some of our colleagues, and that's what we're spending our time doing. So it's a privilege to be here. I'm excited to stand with you all and make sure that we bring some justice back to our counties. So thank you.
Next we have Montana Congressman Gianforte.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's great to be here with you. It's great to see so much support for rural America. And I want to give a special shout out to my commissioners from Montana. It's great to be standing with you here today. So our rural communities need certainty. That's why we're here talking about secure rural schools. And the path there, Jaime just went over it, we need to get our forests working again. That's why I was proud to co-sponsor the Resilient Federal Forest Act and proud that it passed out of the House. We need a little help from the Senate to get that done. But until then, counties need the certainty that comes from secure rural schools. I'm proud to co-sponsor with Cathy McMorris Rodgers her bill, appreciate her leadership on it. We need to reauthorize secure rural schools to provide certainty to our rural communities, and we need to provide for back payments to keep the obligation that we have with our counties. I hope we can move this with the forest management reform so we can get our forests working again. Now, PILT. PILT is also essential. A landowner pays their taxes so that we can fund our priorities, the schools, roads, and public safety. The federal government has to keep its obligation as a landowner to the local communities. That's right, it's only fair. In Montana, 55 of 56 counties receive PILT payments to help pay for education, roads, and public safety. Just a couple of quick stories. In Prairie County, if we didn't have PILT, they'd have to lay off a third of their law enforcement. In Ravalli County, 20% of their budget is PILT payments, and they wouldn't be able to pay for the roads that they need. In Beaverhead County, Montana, we'd lose 2 out of 9 road workers, and they're waiting on SRS payments to pay for roads that they had to shell out the money with without any help from the U.S. government. So this is pretty clear. As I said, a landowner has an obligation. We need to continue funding for PILT, and we need to reauthorize SRS. I'm proud to stand with you all today, and let's get this done.
Now we're going to have some of our commissioners are going to step up and say a few words.
So I'm Gordon Cruikshank. I'm a Valley County Commissioner out of Idaho, and I was a prior road superintendent before I became a commissioner. So I watched my road budget picking up $3.1 million when the Secure Rural Schools was first authorized, to last year, 2 years ago, $1.8 million, and last year my timber receipts brought in $148,000. How can a county budget when you don't even know what the uncertainty is? We have laid off 10 road employees. We've quit buying equipment. Our expenses are going higher and higher. Our schools are having to pass bond levies to be able to even try to keep the schools going. 9 million kids are impacted by the Secure Rural Schools program not being funded. We need to educate our kids, and we need to take care of that. As far as our PILT payments, for many years, it was whatever they had left over. We were getting 30%, 80%, 60%. How can you budget? Now without it being reauthorized, I asked you, if you didn't get any funding for a year, how would you maintain your household? How would you make your payments? What about your mortgages? We had a compact with America to utilize these national forests for our advantage. Gifford Pinchot, when he set this together, said a county with more public lands is better off than a county without. Today, we are hamstrung by that, having so many public lands. 88% in my county. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon.
Mike McGinley, Beaverhead County, Montana. Largest county in Montana at 5,500 square miles. We use our SRS and PILT money. We signed contracts to get these road projects done that last 3 and 4 years. We were depending on the contractor, the federal government, so we could have our match money. As we went with these projects, as Congressman Gianforte said, we made that commitment to our contractors to finish our roads and bridges, and which we did. Now we sit here today waiting for the payments the last 2 years on the SRS to come. So I appreciate this coalition. I hope they can get this done and done soon, because small rural counties are dependent on it very much. Thank you.
I'm Suzanne Bonamici, Otero County Commissioner, New Mexico. New Mexico is over 50% PILT funded, or public lands. My county is over 6,000 square miles. What is 6,000 square miles? That's the size of Connecticut and half of Rhode Island. We have 60,000 people in that amount of land. And what we do have is we have 12% that pay taxes. 88% of my county is public land. Yes, we need our PILT, but we only get PILT on 35% of that 88%. So I have 53% land that I get nothing on. I don't get any type of taxes to help do our roads. We have 1,600 miles of roads that we have to maintain for our citizens. We have the forest, and in that forest we used to have mills. We're down to 3 mills now. We don't have timber because we had endangered species, so they closed down our mills because we couldn't timber our forests. So we need to keep our PILT. We need our SRS. We went down in SRS from over $500,000 down to $40,000. How do we get our kids from the rural communities to school without that money?
I'm Jenny Wilson. I'm a Salt Lake County Council member from Salt Lake County, Utah, and very happy to be with you today. And I want to emphasize the bipartisan nature of this initiative, and that we have come together, and we are so strong when we're together. And I appreciate that we have had, so often here in Washington, we have people on one side of the aisle over here, and people on another side of the aisle over here. We have come together. We can do this. We've done this for years. I worked here in the 90s for a Utah congressman, representing a third of the state of Utah at that time. And I know the value of our county commissioners, and I'm so honored to serve with them now and being a voice to make this happen. So I applaud us all. I want us to continue working, continue to be a voice here, and to continue to emphasize the impact that this is having in our areas when the delays occur, when we're unsure. We have roads to fund, we have jails to fund, we have new programs to fund in our jails, and the funding is so critical. So let's stay at it, and I thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate the great turnout today.
My name is Todd Devlin. I'm from Perry County, Montana, and the commissioner there. I'm also the chairman of the Federal Land Payment Subcommittee of the National Association of Counties. On behalf of the National Association of Counties, I would request that Congress look at their own policy in the Federal Land Policy Management Act of 1976 and Policy 13, which says they will compensate local governments that is both fair to the federal taxpayer and the local taxpayer. They made that policy, and as all we're asking is that they follow it. Thank you.
Anybody else? You got time for another one?
All right, Blair. How you doing? Blair Brady from Washington State, Cathy County. Everything said today, I think we all are 100% in agreement. To have the bipartisan support from our folks today was supportive. Great. Wish there were more here. Just an example in my state, we have 14 counties now that no longer can afford 24-hour police coverage. It's a disgrace. Some of these counties have as much as 90% federally owned, and they are just reneging on their responsibilities at the cost of lives, actually. Thank you.
I'm Karen Scoop, Monterey County, Washington State. I'm in the corner bordering Idaho and Canada. And I just wanted to say something. A lot of times people don't understand that to get to our U.S. forest lands that you have to go on a county road. Most of the time you do. Sometimes it's a state highway, but most of the time the access is actually across a county road. And so that's the crucial part that a lot of Congress people do not understand, is that they are actually roads that we own and we're maintaining. So it's an important aspect to really share with you and to everyone who you go see. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Montoya. I'm a Sandoval County Treasurer, and I'm going to tell you something from the fiscal policy perspective. County taxpayers have a huge burden of paying property taxes in their communities, over 35 mills most of the time, which means they're paying more than their fair share to try to compensate for what we've been losing in PILT and in SRS. It is important and critical that as we pay our property taxes, the federal government pays according to the contracts that they had negotiated previously. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and I think collectively we've sent a strong message to our senators and our representatives, and let's hope that the job gets done. Thanks everybody.